What you just heard weren't random sounds. They were the sounds of my sleepless nights, the tiny wins, and the setbacks that shaped everything. All of them are part of the profit files I keep here, in Profit with A. Tonight, I'm opening files related to something that has shaped my hustle, my mindset, and how I approach every opportunity: books. Not just any books, but money books that changed everything for me. These accounts are not theory, not guesses, they are real stories from my own journey, documented, raw, and practical. What you're about to hear is a walkthrough of the exact steps I took, the mistakes I made, and the lessons I learned, each one a building block in the long road to success. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to Profit with A and hit the notification bell. What we uncover here could be the blueprint for your own hustle, and you won't want to miss what comes next. It was the fall of 2018. I was sitting in my small, cluttered apartment, sipping on a cup of lukewarm coffee, another one of those, I'm up before dawn, trying to figure this out mornings. My laptop, an old MacBook that had been with me for years, sat on the desk in front of me. The battery had long since lost its charge, and I had to keep it plugged in all day. The apartment was quiet, except for the occasional hum of the street outside, and the constant, almost therapeutic sound of keys clicking as I frantically Googled ways to get rich. I had started reading a book recommended by a friend, The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas J. Stanley and William D. Danko. I had heard it mentioned in passing by people who'd seemed to have it all figured out, wealthy, comfortable, and living a life I dreamed of. I remember thinking, what's the secret? What's the game they know that I don't? I had dreams of entrepreneurship, side hustles, passive income, the works. But nothing seemed to be working. I was stuck in a cycle of constant struggle. This book. It promised to show me the way. The first major takeaway hit me like a punch in the gut. Wealth is not about flashy purchases or instant success, it's about living below your means and accumulating steadily. I remember the exact moment I flipped to the chapter about living frugally and building wealth over time. I thought back to my own spending habits, new tech gadgets, dining out more than I should, taking expensive vacations. I had always justified it, thinking I'd make it big sooner or later, so why not enjoy the ride in the meantime? But this book made it clear, those purchases were my barriers. That night, I took a step that would change my entire financial future. I started tracking every penny I spent. I downloaded an app, logged all my expenses, and set a budget for the first time in my life. That was my first action toward breaking free from my own financial habits. The next few months were hard. Painfully hard. I can still hear the buzz of my phone as notifications came through, sales pitches, promotions, new apps. All the things I had spent money on in the past. My old habits weren't just hard to break, they felt like they had a hold on me. I battled temptations like not eating out or resisting the urge to buy new clothes for the season. I even cut down on Netflix subscriptions just to make sure I was staying on track. There were plenty of nights where I was tired, overwhelmed, and wondering if it was worth it. I remember one instance clearly. I had just paid off my credit card and felt a small sense of victory. But then I was tempted to buy a new phone. My old one was starting to show its age. The rational part of me knew better, but that desire to have more was there. I fought it, and won, but it wasn't always easy. I also learned about the importance of investing. Slowly, I began educating myself about stocks, index funds, and even real estate. Each lesson made me realize just how much I had missed out on by not learning about these concepts sooner. The turning point came after about 6 months of constant work. It wasn't an instant payoff or a windfall. It wasn't a huge check coming in the mail. But it was the feeling, the clarity that I was on the right path. I saw the first signs of financial freedom. My savings account had actually grown, and it didn't feel like I was living paycheck to paycheck anymore. There was no magic moment, it was the gradual accumulation of better decisions and smarter habits. The first $1,000 I saved, without any debt, was a quiet victory. It wasn't about the number. It was about the discipline and consistency. I also started seeing results from investing, small returns, but the first extra income one made without working overtime or hustling like I had been. It was proof that I was on the right track. The reality is, I didn't become a millionaire overnight. Far from it. But what happened was far more important. I learned the value of patience, discipline, and consistency. The money didn't start flowing in the way I expected, but it was building, slowly but surely. This wasn't about quick fixes or getting rich off of one venture. It was about building a foundation for a future of financial freedom. The lesson: wealth isn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a marathon, not a sprint. At Profit with A, we classify this as a milestone moment, not because of the money earned, but because it was proof that discipline and consistency, over time, create lasting wealth. But that book didn't just teach me about frugality, it was just the beginning. If I could change my mindset on spending, there had to be other lessons that could reshape my approach to making money. The next book in my journey would challenge everything I thought I knew about work, money, and time. Book 2. Rich Dad Poor Dad: The Financial Mindset Shift. It was the winter of 2019. I had just finished The Millionaire Next Door and felt like I was on the right track, but something was still missing. I had savings, but I was beginning to feel trapped in my 9-to-5 job. That's when a friend handed me Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. It seemed like a cliché at the time. Everyone had heard of it, everyone had read it, and some people even treated it like a Bible for wealth building. But I was desperate to understand how I could break free from my job and create true financial independence. The book's premise was simple: work for money, or make money work for you. The first step was when Kiyosaki introduced me to the idea of assets versus liabilities. This wasn't just financial jargon, this was a mindset shift. I realized that I had been working to pay bills, accumulating liabilities with every paycheck, while my assets, my investments, my skills, were sitting stagnant. I immediately started looking at the money I made differently. Instead of just paying bills, I started asking, what can I do with this money that will make it work for me? It was the first time I saw myself as an investor, not just a worker. The shift wasn't easy. In fact, it was harder than I imagined. I started looking at my spending habits, but I realized that I had been living with an employee mindset. I worked for money, and money only went out to pay for things that didn't generate more money. It was tough to make sense of it all. I started taking small steps, putting money into stocks, learning about real estate, but I didn't have much of a safety net. Each decision felt like a gamble. And while I could see the potential, I didn't yet understand how to turn these small moves into something larger. The turning point came when I made my first successful investment in real estate. It was a small deal, nothing major. But it made me realize that the principles Kiyosaki talked about really worked. I saw the rent checks come in, and for the first time, I wasn't just earning money from my job. I was making money from something I owned. The first passive income was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The reality was that financial freedom wouldn't come instantly, and that first real estate investment wasn't a ticket to riches. But it proved to me that it could be done. The lesson: think like an investor, not just an employee. You need to work on building assets that will pay you while you sleep. At Profit with A, we classify this as a perspective shift, not because of the money earned, but because it was proof that your mindset shapes your wealth-building journey. However, the real challenge was understanding how to balance risk and opportunity. The next book I came across would push me even further into the realm of investing and business, teaching me about risk in a way I hadn't fully grasped before. File Profit 103, The Intelligent Investor, Mastering Risk and Patience. It was early 2020, right at the height of the pandemic. The world was in chaos, and so was my personal financial situation. I had some savings, a couple of investments, and a few side hustles going, but I was far from feeling financially secure. As the market plummeted and uncertainty loomed, I picked up The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, a book that had been recommended by every investor I admired. I was skeptical at first. The book was dense, filled with jargon I barely understood. But I soon realized this wasn't just another book on investing, it was about mastering the psychology of risk and patience. I was about to learn how to approach investing with discipline, not emotion. The first pivotal moment came when I read Graham's concept of Mr. Market. He personified the stock market as a manic-depressive business partner who offers to buy your shares at irrationally high or low prices. The key, according to Graham, was to ignore Mr. Market's mood swings and make rational decisions based on value, not emotion. That night, I pulled up my brokerage account and looked at my portfolio. I was in the red, deeply. I had made investments based on hype, chasing trends without understanding the fundamentals. I had followed the herd. But Graham's wisdom struck me. I wasn't an investor, I was a gambler. I decided to shift my strategy. I started researching stocks with solid fundamentals, companies that were undervalued and had strong long-term prospects. It was a big mental shift. I wasn't just buying stocks, I was buying companies. In the months that followed, the learning curve was steep. I remember reading and rereading Graham's chapters on risk and margin of safety. I took notes, highlighted sections, and began following his principles to the letter. I made a spreadsheet, listing out companies I was interested in based on their earnings, debt levels, and long-term growth potential. But the process wasn't easy. I found myself second-guessing my decisions, questioning whether I was making the right moves. In a volatile market, it felt like I was swimming against the current. There were times when the stock prices of companies I invested in dropped, sometimes sharply, and I felt the familiar temptation to sell and cut my losses. I resisted the urge. Instead, I stuck to Graham's philosophy: don't panic during market downturns. If you've made an intelligent investment, stick with it. The anxiety was real, but I pushed through it by staying focused on the long term. The turning point came almost a year later, during the recovery period. I saw the value of my investments slowly increase. More importantly, I had learned to approach every move with patience and discipline, two virtues that had eluded me before. One of my investments, a solid dividend-paying company, had begun to yield returns that I could reinvest. I wasn't getting rich overnight, but I could feel the shift. The investment process no longer felt like a gamble, it felt like a calculated, thoughtful pursuit. This was no longer about making money fast, it was about making money intelligently. The reality was that, despite the success, I still wasn't fully there. My portfolio was growing, but I had to remind myself that this was a slow process. Some of my investments were still underperforming, but I had learned the importance of keeping the course steady. The lesson: patience is the key to wealth building. A successful investor doesn't chase trends, but focuses on sound fundamentals and long-term growth. And above all, risk is an essential part of the journey, so long as you manage it wisely. At Profit with A, we classify this as a long-term strategy moment. Not because of immediate returns, but because it was proof that true wealth comes from making disciplined, patient decisions. However, investing was just one part of the puzzle. The next book would push me further into understanding the entrepreneurial mindset, the idea that, to truly succeed, you need to learn to take risks in business as well as in investments. File Profit 104, The 4-Hour Workweek, Redefining Time and Freedom. It was the summer of 2020, and I had already been feeling the weight of my side hustles. I had learned about personal finance, investing, and the importance of long-term wealth building, but something was still missing: time. I was working constantly, my job, my side hustles, my investments, yet I felt like I was constantly behind. That's when I picked up The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. The title alone was enough to pique my interest, but the concept of outsourcing and creating automated income streams really grabbed my attention. The book promised to show how to free yourself from the 9-to-5 grind and live a life of freedom and flexibility. The first thing I did after reading the first few chapters was to take a step back and reevaluate how I was spending my time. Ferriss spoke about the concept of the new rich, people who build businesses that give them more time, not more money. I realized that I was doing the opposite. I was working harder and longer, and yet I wasn't creating the freedom I had hoped for. The first significant step I took was automating as many of my side hustles as I could. I started outsourcing tasks I didn't need to do myself, things like website maintenance, social media management, and even customer support. The idea of freeing up time seemed revolutionary, but I was skeptical. Would it work? It did. Slowly at first, I started to notice a change. I freed up hours of my week and could focus more on growing my businesses, rather than getting bogged down in the day-to-day tasks. The first few months were rocky. I had to get comfortable with the idea of letting go, hiring virtual assistants, setting up automated systems, and learning to delegate. At first, I felt like I had lost control. There were mistakes, miscommunications, and moments where I doubted whether I was doing the right thing. I also had to learn to set boundaries and avoid micromanaging. That was a tough lesson. But with each small success, I began to see the power of Ferriss' philosophy. I wasn't just running my businesses, I was becoming a strategic leader who could scale without burning out. The turning point came when I realized that my time was no longer being consumed by tasks that didn't require my direct involvement. I started focusing on higher-level goals, expanding my brand, growing my audience, and even taking short vacations without worrying about my businesses falling apart. One of the most significant wins came when I was able to take an entire week off without checking my phone once. The businesses kept running smoothly, and I didn't lose any traction. I had truly started to build systems that worked without my constant presence. The reality was that my businesses didn't run perfectly while I was away, and there were still kinks to iron out. But the lesson was clear. Time freedom is attainable if you're willing to automate, outsource, and focus on building systems, not just working harder. The lesson: the 4-hour workweek isn't about working less for the sake of it, but about creating a lifestyle where your business works for you. It's not about escaping work, but about creating a balance between life and hustle. At Profit with A, we classify this as a freedom moment, not because it's about escaping work, but because it's about learning to create a system that works with you, not against you. Building systems to create time freedom was a huge shift, but it was only part of the bigger picture. The next book was going to challenge me to rethink what it meant to create value and how to market that value effectively to the world. File Profit 109, Atomic Habits, The Power of Small Wins. It was early 2022, and after the momentum from launching my coaching program, I found myself in a new phase of growth. I had built systems, I had created remarkable products, and I was starting to see more stability in my income. But there was one major obstacle I still struggled with: consistency. Despite my success, I still found myself procrastinating, losing focus, and often feeling burnt out. My daily routines were not as structured as they needed to be. This is when I picked up Atomic Habits by James Clear, a book that promised to teach me how to build small, sustainable habits that would compound over time into real, lasting change. The first concept that hit me was Clear's idea of compound growth, how small habits, done consistently over time, can lead to enormous results. I had heard it before, but Atomic Habits gave it a new context that clicked with me. I had always focused on big, flashy goals. Launching the next product, hitting a revenue target. But Clear made me realize that success doesn't come from those big moments. It comes from small, daily actions. I remember reading about the concept of habit stacking, where you attach a new habit to an existing one. That night, I decided to implement just one new habit: writing for 15 minutes each morning. It wasn't much, but I was determined to stick with it. I could stack it with my morning coffee, turning it into a productive ritual that didn't require me to overthink. At first, the results were underwhelming. For the first few weeks, it was a struggle. I would forget to write or feel too busy. It wasn't like magic had happened overnight, and my mind often tempted me to skip the habit. I had done the big things in the past, so why couldn't I just push through and get back to doing bigger tasks? But over time, I began to notice subtle shifts. I found myself writing more than just 15 minutes. I'd start the day feeling productive, and I noticed that I felt more focused on my tasks throughout the day. Writing wasn't just a task, it became a part of who I was. I stacked additional habits on top of it: daily reading, an evening review of my goals, and even a quick morning workout. The more I built on these habits, the more I realized how much they contributed to my mental clarity and overall productivity. The turning point came when I realized I had developed an entirely new mindset toward work. Instead of thinking about work in terms of big projects or long days, I started focusing on small, consistent habits that led to bigger achievements. It wasn't about doing more, it was about doing it regularly. My ability to stay on track with my goals improved dramatically. I no longer felt overwhelmed by my to-do list. Instead, I felt empowered to tackle small tasks, knowing that they would add up. The result? Increased productivity, better time management, and, most importantly, peace of mind. The reality was that small habits, over time, built the foundation for my ongoing success. By focusing on micro wins, I had created a system where progress felt effortless. I didn't need motivation to push through tasks because the habits had become automatic. The lesson: success is a series of small, consistent actions compounded over time. It's not about waiting for motivation, it's about creating habits that drive success without needing to rely on fleeting bursts of energy. At Profit with A, we classify this as a consistency moment, not because of an overnight breakthrough, but because it proved that small, focused habits are the true drivers of long-term success. Building consistent habits was a game changer. But to truly scale and position myself for further success, the next book took me into a whole new arena, understanding the role of leadership and creating a company culture that fosters growth. File Profit 110, Good to Great, Building a Lasting Legacy. It was the winter of 2022. My business was running well, and I had systems, habits, and marketing strategies in place. But something was missing. I had achieved success, but I wasn't sure how to sustain it. The hustle was still there, but it was beginning to feel like I was merely managing my success, not growing it. That's when I picked up Good to Great by Jim Collins. This book had been recommended to me by several mentors who had been in the business game for decades. The premise was simple: what makes good companies great, and what makes great companies last. Collins' research into companies that had achieved sustained success over time captivated me. I wasn't just looking for quick wins anymore. I wanted to build a legacy, something that would stand the test of time. The first lesson from the book that truly resonated with me was the idea of the hedgehog concept. Collins describes this as the intersection of three areas: what you are deeply passionate about, what you can be the best at, and what drives your economic engine. This wasn't just about working hard, it was about aligning everything with what mattered most. I took a step back and reevaluated my business, asking myself these three questions. What am I truly passionate about? What can I be the best at? What drives my business financial success? The answers weren't easy. I had to get brutally honest with myself about what my strengths were, what my true purpose was, and how I could structure my business for long-term sustainability. It was more than just a shift in mindset, it was a complete reframing of my approach. The real challenge came when I started to think about discipline. Collins emphasizes the importance of having disciplined people who are committed to a shared vision. I had always prided myself on doing everything on my own, but now I was facing a new challenge. Building a team of people who shared my vision. I spent time finding the right people, people who were not just good at what they did, but people who understood the company's mission and values. It took time to find the right fit, and it wasn't always easy. I had to let go of some control and delegate more responsibilities, which felt uncomfortable at first. But as the right people started to come together, I saw the culture begin to shift. I wasn't just leading, I was empowering my team to take ownership of their roles and contribute to the company's long-term success. The breakthrough moment came when I realized that my business wasn't just about me anymore, it was about a team working together toward a shared vision. We started hitting milestones we hadn't been able to reach before, and the company culture was thriving. There was an energy, a sense of momentum that I hadn't experienced in the earlier years of my hustle. More importantly, I realized that we were creating something sustainable. This wasn't just a good business, it was evolving into a great one. We had developed the discipline, vision, and team dynamics to push through challenges and continue growing. The reality was that building a lasting company wasn't about quick wins or flash-in-the-pan strategies. It was about creating the right environment for growth, aligning the team with a shared vision, and having the discipline to stay focused on long-term goals. The lesson: greatness isn't a one-time achievement, it's a continuous, disciplined process of aligning passion, skill, and financial strategy while building a team that is just as committed to the journey. At Profit with A, we classify this as a legacy moment, not because of immediate results, but because it proved that building a great business is a long-term endeavor that requires vision, discipline, and the right people. After everything I had learned from these books, I came to realize that the hustle, while important, is just one piece of the puzzle. It's the systems, habits, and leadership that truly define success, and it's these principles that will continue to guide me through every chapter of my journey. These files show the same truth: making money isn't about finding that one shortcut or waiting for the perfect time. It's about consistency, trial and error, and a willingness to start small. Each chapter one shared with you tonight, from the Millionaire Next Door to Good to Great, illustrates that success isn't built on big wins, but on steady progress over time. The truth is, I didn't become successful overnight. In fact, I stumbled more times than I can count. But the key takeaway from all these books, and my personal journey, is this: the hustle isn't about doing everything at once, it's about taking consistent action every day. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to start, learn, and keep going. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Start where you are, with what you have. The first win, no matter how small, is proof that the door is open. And the more you step through it, the easier it becomes to open the next one. Remember, each book, each lesson, and each story wasn't just about the success I had. It's about the power of starting and sticking with it. The real hustle begins when you stop waiting for the perfect moment and start creating it. If you've started your own hustle, drop your story in the comments. I might feature it in a future profit log. We're all on this journey together, and your experiences could inspire someone else to take the next step. Make sure you're subscribed to Profit with A and hit the notification bell, so you never miss a new profit log. The stories we share here could be the blueprint for your own hustle, and trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. There's always a new door waiting to be opened. We've shared the lessons, and now it's time for you to apply them to your own journey. Until next time, keep hustling.